Welcome into the Patriots Hub podcast, brand new episode, recording Monday, March 3rd. Alex Barth, Matt Dolloff with you from 98.5 thesportshub.com as we hit what is both a very busy and very quiet week in the NFL, Dolph. We're going to have a lot to get to today because we are kind of in between. The NFL Combine was last week. We will certainly talk about that. And then free agency is next week. So this week, not a ton of real hard news outside of players, teams re-signing their own players.
Right, outside of New England anyway.
Right, but there's going to be
here.
a ton of rumors and speculation and reports and all of that, and also just reaction to draft talk and what happened at the Combine and things like that. So we'll get into all of that. I do want to start with the Combine. If you missed it, we did shows. I was in Indy last week and we had some shows.
Oh, reacting. You did shows?
We did do a few shows. We did record a couple of videos in Indianapolis. Which you and Jim and Luke did a great job of making sure, were posted, because it was like back to back to back for me recording. And if I had to stop to post videos after, we would have gotten like half the content.
I was making the joke, Barth. It's like taking the dog to the dog park for the first time. We just wanted to let you run free and enjoy yourself. I was happy just holding down the fort, handling technical stuff, keeping stuff updated. You run free and enjoy yourself. And so it looked like you enjoyed yourself.
I did. I enjoyed myself. I feel like we got a lot accomplished. I will, just to reflect real quick, I guess, before we move forward, I'll say this. It's a lot. I really didn't know what to expect. Even people giving me advice, I wasn't really sure, because, I talk to people who are primarily writers and they go and do that. I talk to people, that's their focus. I talk to people who primarily do radio, and I was kind of doing a little bit of everything. So I'm really happy with what I got done. There were a few more things I wanted to do I didn't get to do, that just because of it being a feeling out process, I kind of knew that might happen. But assuming we get to do it again next year, I know going back, like, exactly what I want, exactly how we can structure it and all that. But really proud of the stuff we put up. It's all on Sports Hub YouTube channel, Sports Hub Patriots audio feed, wherever you get your podcast. We post audio video. We posted audio versions of everything. And then 98.5thesportshub.com, meeting tracker, reactions, and all of that. So like I was saying, we did a couple of podcasts last week with me and Indy reacting to Mike Vrabel and Elliot Wolf's comments. So that's up. We're not going to do a ton on that. I don't know if you have any, now that it's a week later, we've digested it, if you have any parting thoughts on what they said, but I figured we just kind of briefly do that before we move on, because that's we've already talked about that.
We've already talked about Vrabel and Wolf, and I mean, there's been plenty of reports coming out about like what they plan to do or what they think they're going to be interested in doing. So yeah, I think it's time to get into more of that stuff.
So they're reporting the two big pieces that are out there right now. The Boston Herald and Mass Live did each a fantastic job of just intel.
They sent their boots on the ground and they came back with
they really did
all kinds of intel. Love it.
And the big thing that stands out to me, at least from a free agency point of view, is we have some names. A lot of them are names that we have been talking about. Ronnie Stanley, the left tackle from the Ravens, if he hits free agency, a lot tying him to the Patriots. Now, we will see if he hits the open market. The Ravens brass talked last week about wanting to keep him, but just talking to people there, that didn't exactly sound like a guarantee one way or the other. I think that's really an unknown right now. If he doesn't hit the market, there's not going to be a lot of tackle options. Alaric Jackson, another guy they were tied to, has since re-signed. So now you're looking at Cam Robinson and Dan Moore. Milton Williams' name was on that list. He was a guy we heard from. Jamian Sherwood, the linebacker from the Jets. Charvarius Ward from the Niners, a bigger corner, which is something I've wanted. The only name I was kind of surprised, and I think the Herald even had that they're not interested in him, was Josh Sweat.
Yeah,
the pass rusher from the Eagles.
Not interested in Josh Sweat.
Which is interesting. Besides that, though, I feel like it's a lot of the names, and if not the specific names, mostly the positions that we've been talking about. Not a ton of buzz at wide receiver. It sounds like they would go after Higgins if he were available. That's not expected to happen. Same for Chris Godwin. So it seems like what a lot of people have kind of projected. I don't know, is the word chalk fair here? It seems like what the Patriots, and we'll see if they actually do it, but what they're lining up for is kind of, chalk for what we more or less expected.
I'm not sure I know the term chalk. Forgive me for this part.
So it's Happy March. Like if you're doing a March Madness bracket, right, and you don't have a lot of upsets, like it's chalk. right? It's no surprise. It basically means no surprises.
Okay, all
Like
right. I'm not up
projected.
on March Madness terminology.
I'll find the actual
I
definition.
apologize for
You're
that.
Good.
No, Milton Williams was the one that stood out to me because he was in both of the big reports. So
Okay.
that feels like that's going to be one of the guys that they're going to be going after early on. And they're looking at him like, look, we're going to give you a real nice contract here. You're going to be our splash. And so that's a guy that seems to fit what they want to do. Obviously, they want to beef up in the trenches in general, but Milton Williams, big guy, disruptive, well-rounded, like he would fit well, and like he could be their big splash on the defensive line. Offensive line feels a little different. Like Ronnie Stanley, you heard about. Phil Perry mentioned him when he talked to you on the special edition of the podcast out there in Indy. But it feels like he could still re-sign with the Ravens. It feels like he might not be out there. And so it might turn to a guy like Dan Moore or Cam Robinson to be their big tackle signing. And that would be a guy that we've talked about before, where we'd come out of it saying, you know what, they're overpaid, but they sort of had to do it. And like, that's how I would look at it with one of those two tackle signings. But I'll still take a Dan Moore or even a Cam Robinson over Vidarian Lowe.
Sure.
Right. So I think if they sign one of those two tackles and Milt Williams, that's their big splash to start free agency. That's their message that we are upgrading in the trenches. And so I would take that.
By the way, chalk is defined as either in sports betting, chalk is basically a significant favorite, or betting on chalk is picking higher seeded teams to beat lower seeded teams, is a boring yet reliable method of filling out a bracket. It's actually kind of fitting. I think there's some people who, if the Patriots just come out and sign a bunch of linemen, are going to be a little bored and are going to be a little disappointed because they want the splash. They want to buy the jersey. They want the guy they can draft in fantasy, right? But a boring yet reliable method. Reliable is the key word there. I'll take reliable at this point.
Seriously.
So to me, Ronnie Stanley, as if we're following the Patriots this week, right? Especially when they don't have any real pressing internal free agents. Like their biggest internal free agents are like John Jones, Austin Hooper. These are middle of the roster players.
Mm-hmm.
John Jones at this point was a better player, a few years ago. But the big thing you're looking for, and by nature of this podcast, we'll get a resolution about 10 minutes after we're done recording. The big thing you're looking for the Patriots this week is, does Ronnie Stanley hit the open market, or do the Ravens let him go? You figure that, all right, you're going to keep Lamar Jackson's blind side protected. They're in a championship window. He's a preference, but they have 22 pending free agents, and they currently project to have $12 million in cap space. So somebody's going to get left on the outside looking in, right? And if even if they are trying to bring back Stanley, even if they make him a priority, that still might have to come with a hometown discount. And this is a guy that's 31 years old, right? Is entering the back portion of his career. Does he look at that and say, nope, this is my last chance to cash in, I'm taking it? If that's his mentality, I think you feel pretty good about the Patriots making a run. Now, they obviously have to put the money on the table, but they can put more money on the table than anybody. If he looks at it and says, I want a ring, I'm going to do what I need to do to stay in Baltimore and run this thing back, well, what can you do? But Ronnie Stanley, to me, is the biggest talking point right now because, Cam Robinson works for me as a bridge. You get into Dan Moore territory, I still think starting left tackle is a need. Like that guy, that's somebody who should be competing for a job at best. That's not somebody you're giving the job to. And we'll get to the left tackle situation in the draft, which obviously some big developments in that yesterday.
Mm-hmm.
But, what would be great about signing Ronnie Stanley to me, and Cam Robinson to a lesser extent, if you sign Ronnie Stanley, left tackle's no longer a need this offseason. Right tackle still is. And, he's 31, so in a year or two, that need's going to pop up again, hopefully in a stronger draft for the position.
Mm-hmm.
But if you don't believe in Will Campbell, which we'll get to because there was some reporting on how the Patriots feel about him, but if you don't believe in Will Campbell or any of these other left tackles, you don't need to force it. You have Ronnie Stanley and you're sitting with him and you're in good shape, right? So to me, he's the most important player. With guys like Milton Williams, some of those other defensive front guys, some of those corner guys, that happens to line up with the strengths of this draft class. So I'm less worried there. They should sign more than one impact player, but being able to sign Ronnie Stanley tremendously changes, to me, the outcome of their offseason, the picture of their offseason.
Well, yeah, you just said it. Like the draft part, like I feel like we got to wait and see on the Will Campbell thing, like whether he's even like really in need, how big of a need tackle is based on what they do in free agency. And like, I just think it's risky. I wouldn't want them to sort of zero in on Ronnie Stanley when it's a guy you don't even know if he's actually going to even hit the open market. And I look at Ronnie Stanley like I'm not going to tell him what he should do because I don't know what his priorities are right now. But if he said like this is my last big payday, I got to go get wherever I go to the highest bidder, wouldn't blame him at all.
No,
but the Patriots would have to be that team. Do I trust them to be that team? Not necessarily. And
they can be is the point.
They can be.
They have the resources to be.
They have the resources to do it. They have the ability to do it. Will they do it? That's the real question. And there's another part of this with the Ravens, Barth, is that Patrick McCarry, their guard, he's also a free agent, also mentioned as a name to watch for the Patriots, which I found interesting. Yeah. I don't know. I think it's too far to say that they're sort of set at guard, but like if they made a big free agent signing for a starting guard, that would be a little surprising to me. I thought maybe they'd bring in a guy, like you said, that could compete for a job at guard.
That's one for me. Like we had talked about this with Trey Smith, who now is expected to get franchise tags, so it changes the conversation there. But it's like, if you sign Ronnie Stanley, if you just want to recreate the left side of the Ravens offensive line and sign, Stanley and McCarry,
I'd be okay with that.
That'd be great.
Can they get Derrick Henry too?
If McCarry's like Mike Vrabel has the connection. If McCarry's
there you go.
If McCarry's like your second, your third biggest signing, I think he makes a lot of sense. If you're coming away from the offseason saying we got Patrick McCarry and that's your headline, I don't think that's enough. No. I'm not against them signing a left guard. Layden Robinson struggled last year. We still don't know exactly what position Cole Strange plays.
What is City So?
Right. City So he's not a bad option to have as depth. I don't know that he's a guy you want starting week one. But I think he was better than what they had last year, but that's not saying much. So,
but Owenu, I feel like the guys will agree that he's going to be right guard.
Right guard, they're set, and he should not be playing tackle. Like the two positions I know are David Andrews at center and Mike Onwenu at right guard. Mm-hmm. It's the other three spots that they need to fill, and how they do that is what we'll see. But to me, those other three spots are all up for grabs. I don't think Caden Wallace, although he did show a couple flashes last year, I don't think he prevents you from adding a right tackle. You can get better, especially in free agency, if you get somebody who's a more proven commodity. Left guard, just talked about Layden Robinson, Cole Strange, and obviously left tackle, they need to upgrade over Vidarian Lowe and not bring in somebody to compete with him, but somebody who will be the clear-cut starter.
Sure. Well, you think Dan Moore would be like competing with Vidarian Lowe? I thought he would. I don't think he's like I think he'd be, an average.
No, but he's still somebody where, like, if they sign Ronnie Stanley, right? I'm good.
That's good. They have solved the problem for at least 1 or 2 years.
Vidarian Lowe's your backup. I'm all set. Like, perfect. Rolling. If it's Dan Moore, now I'm like, I'm not taking Will Campbell or Kelvin Banks or any of these guys at the top of the draft, but do I look at a guy like Anthony Belton, who could play on the left side on day 2, somebody like that, maybe early day 3. I liked some of the testing. I think the tackles helped themselves yesterday. I'm surprised you don't want to do a full hour on Holland Pierce from Rutgers. But like,
I texted you back one word.
Yeah, we'll get to Holland Pierce, but I would still be like, all right, well, can you get like a guy in the top 100, a rookie to come in and compete with Moore in Lowe? And like, there's a chance that maybe that guy, if you develop him right, can win out for that job. If it's Ronnie Stanley, I don't think you need to do that.
Yeah, no, look, Ronnie Stanley feels like he's sort of turning into like a linchpin for the whole thing, where like if they do sign him, everything else can sort of fall into place easier. If they don't sign him, it becomes a little scrambly as far as how they fill that position.
It gets a lot more murky, I would say, at left tackle. But you know what? Based on the reporting, doesn't it seem like they kind of feel that way? At least to an extent, that like Ronnie Stanley, he's mentioned in both pieces. He's mentioned early. You hear other people talking about him. Like, doesn't it kind of feel like he's their top priority if we're reading the tea leaves?
I think so. Yeah. Like that's what Phil Perry said, like I said earlier, and he's among their top targets, I think is how the Herald put it. And so we got to see if he actually hits the open market. Right. But I wonder how interested the Ravens are in re-signing him or like giving him a long-term deal. Maybe it's the term. That's sort of the question with Ronnie Stanley. But yeah, Stanley is a guy that I would absolutely take. And even if they had to give him like a 4-year deal and like you're paying him as a 34, 35-year-old left tackle, he's overpaid by the end of that deal, I'm okay with it. We're at the point where like we need to get real talent at that spot. Especially, I've been saying left tackle over and over again, so I'm not going to turn my nose up at Ronnie Stanley at this point.
Right. And it's also, a 4-year deal in the NFL. We know what that means. It's
Or
2, maybe
2 years,
3, right?
2 years, then we'll see.
You can front load it. And again, for a guy that's trying to get paid, if that's his motivation, he's not going to mind. As long as the money's there, I don't think he's going to care a ton if he gets it up. He'd probably rather have it up front, right, than on the back end. So it would make sense for them.
And the other thing is, like, if he wants to win a Super Bowl, like, what are his options really? Like, if he doesn't stay with the Ravens, what Super Bowl caliber team needs a starting left tackle? The Chiefs would. Do you think the Chiefs would do that?
I don't know what their financial situation is, but if he wants to win, I think he stays in Baltimore because it's where he's familiar. If he's not going to chase the bag to another contender, that just doesn't make a lot of sense.
That's sort of what I'm saying.
Because those teams don't usually have the money to pay those guys.
Right. They usually don't have the money, or they don't have the spot for the guy. And like, yeah, I guess the Chiefs could plug him in there, but like, is that worth it? Where like he would leave the Ravens for that? I don't see that as being worth it for him. I think it's either stay with the Ravens or go to the highest bidder. Those are basically his two choices.
Yeah. And then the other part of this is the draft, where so before we got the measurement, Mass Live had reported the Patriots view Will Campbell as a tackle, quote, arm length be damned.
Yeah.
Which
that was interesting.
I got excited by because I thought he was going to come in at like 32 7/8.
Yep.
Then he measures in at 33 5/8, which is short. He also has not just short arms, the shortest wingspan. I was just looking at this tweet because I sent
Barth has a quarter of an inch ever been more controversial in human history.
Seriously. From Trevor Sikkema, who's one of these draft guys. Campbell's 77 3/8 wingspan would be the shortest wingspan of any offensive tackle at the combine since at least 2011. So this is a guy that does not have that reach. I still think he's tremendously talented, but like I feel less comfortable with Will Campbell now than I did. And it's, would I still take him as a left tackle? Like if there's no other option, I'd rather I still think he can be, I still think he offers more of a ceiling than the guys you're going to get later in the draft, obviously. But the floor is not quite what I thought it was. And there's some uneasiness there. And I don't know that he's a definitive answer at this point. He might be an answer, but I don't know that he's a definitive answer. So, if you don't get Ronnie Stanley, before it was like, all right, so then it's just Will Campbell in the draft. And they have to do, to the people who think, because I've seen this on my Twitter ever since the measurement and YouTube comments and stuff, to the people who think I'm just like so obsessed with Will Campbell, I'm so obsessed with making sure Drake May is protected.
Yeah.
Let's be very clear about that, specifically from the blind side.
Right. You're not
specifically from left tackle and left guard.
You're not saying like he's the next Anthony Munoz. You're saying we just need a goddamn left tackle.
Thank you. Yes. They need to address that. And if they don't get Stanley, what is the best way to address it? Before I said Campbell was the second best behind Stanley, I might put Robinson ahead of him, but like him and Dan Moore to me still a conversation. So how do you feel about Campbell? You sizist. How do you feel about Will Campbell now with the arm measurement? And is he still a viable option at left tackle to you?
Oh, well, I like the size, but what I've said about Will Campbell all along is that he's got the size and he's got the athleticism that he's going to play and he's going to be good somewhere in the NFL. I just feel like it's going to be left guard. I think eventually he's going to be left guard. He's going to be a guy that they're going to try him a left tackle. It's not going to quite work out the way they want. They'll kick him inside and he'll settle in as a good starting left guard.
So you're out on Will Campbell for the Patriots then the first round.
I'm out on Will Campbell at 4. Yeah. Like I don't know what I want them to do with the after other than that, but
so
like,
that's the thing to me. You can say that, but what's your plan at tackle now? If they don't get Ronnie Stanley, if he doesn't hit the open market, what is your plan at left tackle?
Sign one of the other free agents. Like I'm not going to thumb my nose up at Cam Robinson or Dan Moore either. I'm not saying that, everyone knows those guys aren't going to be Hall of Famers or anything like that, but they're at least going to be serviceable. You would think they'll be better than serviceable. Cam Robinson,
I think would be solid.
He played for Doug Marrone in Jacksonville. So like there's familiarity there. I'm not saying you need to sign a tackle for $20 million because of familiarity, but these are guys that at least have proven to be starting caliber left tackles, which the Patriots have not had that in a couple of years now. And so goes back to my point where like, we can't just say it's Ronnie Stanley or bust because they have to have other options. They have to have a plan B and a plan C. And if they get Ronnie Stanley, great. If they don't, sign one of these other guys and like fill in your defensive line or maybe trade down in the first round of the NFL draft.
Trade down is assuming we'll get to Hunter.
I need to draw a hard line on the arm length thing because I became a believer in the whole arm length thing.
Okay.
We were talking about 32 7/8, and it's like I can't give him that eighth of an inch. Now we're talking 3/4 of an inch or whatever it is, half an inch off of what he thought he could be. Like I can't do it. I think he's left guard, and that would just be way overdrafting. Even if he's a really good starting left guard, that would be a way overdrafting him.
And what makes it tough is like he's not the only one. A lot of other guys hit that 33-inch mark, but Kelvin Banks, Ariante Ursary, Josh Connerly, like all measured in shorter than expected. They're all at 33, but they're all like just over 33, anywhere from like, I think it's Connerly's right at 33. One of them's right between Banks, Ursary, Connerly, and there was somebody else. One's right at 33.
Yeah, I skimmed through it. They're all like 33 to 33 and a quarter.
Yeah, nobody's really over 33 and a half. So it is a shorter group. Some people pointed out the measurements were shorter than they were at the Senior Bowl, so maybe you adjust for that. But even adjusting for that, Campbell's still under that 33-inch mark. He's still under the 32 and 7/8 that I would have played him at. And the wingspan thing on top of that, I don't get how arm length and wingspan can be different. I guess you have like really wide shoulders, but that part too, like he's just not going to have the reach, and it's concerning. It is concerning.
Like he's going to be a guy that one of these like 6'2" fast edge rushers is just going to run right under him. Well, he's going to pull right under those arms.
When people ask about arm length, the example I always give is, the movie thing where the older brother's teasing the younger brother, puts his head on the forehead, just swinging underneath, right?
That's what you're going to have to hope he can do that, I guess.
Right. That's what you're worried about. So we'll see what happens with Ronnie Stanley. Opposite sort of development at the wide receiver position so I didn't think Stanley was going to be available going into Combine Week. I didn't think Ronnie Stanley was going to be available. Meanwhile, the wide receivers, that wide receiver class, the free agent class shrunk, but the draft class seemingly grew. T. Higgins sounds like won't hit the market. Chris Godwin, it sounds like won't hit the market, which is a little more unexpected. But then you had Matthew Golden test the way he did. You had Luther Burden, I thought had a great week in terms of testing, in terms of, his podium, all of that. Some of these day two guys I thought really popped, Jalen Noel, Xavier Restrepo. So now I'm back. I've kind of flipped where I was, you got to draft the tackle. You got to draft him, find the receiver in the veteran market. Well, now I don't know the receiver is in the veteran market. Debo went for a fifth, and I'm so fine they passed on Debo. He hasn't been the same player for 2 or 3 years. He's going to get to play next to Terry McLaurin in Washington. That'll help him. He's not a guy that can carry an offense anymore. I think Cooper Kupp is kind of the same thing. He's a complimentary player at this point. So now I'm looking at it like you might have to sign the tackle and Ronnie Stanley, and whether it's one of those day two guys. Also, I should mention like Travis Hunter being open to playing wide receiver and talking about that is notable. Now suddenly it looks like maybe this wide receiver class is better than we thought.
Yeah, I mean, like I'd still take one of these receivers on day two. I just don't know that there's going to be that guy, not at 4. Maybe if they trade down a few spots and you're talking about Ted McMillan, or if they trade back up into the end of the first round, which is where you have Matthew Golden going in your first mock draft. I had a quick question. Like, did he move up in your mock draft rankings after the combine? Like, do you have, now he's a late first round pick, or is that where he was sort of projected to go?
I had him late first, early second. I would say to that I moved him up, and I do have an NFL mock draft up now, 98.5thesportshub.com. I moved him up in the sense that I view him, Burden, and Egbuka. I kind of viewed them in a group, and I figure 1, maybe 2 go in the first round. And this is what when we talk about sorting out the positions, right? Whether it be Senior Bowl, the Combine, it moved him ahead of Egbuka. So there was an original draft of that where I don't want to give too much away, but Burden goes in the mid-20s or in the early 20s. Like you said, Golden goes in the mid-20s. I originally had a version where it was Emeka Egbuka going 32 to the Eagles, and that just seemed unfair. Yeah. And I don't want to put that in the universe.
Right.
That'd be filthy. Plus
don't
the Howie
Roseman
quote about drafting linemen. So I tweaked that a little bit. But before the Combine, the team I have taking Golden, I knew kind of going in, I wanted to have them taking a receiver. It probably was going to be Egbuka before the Combine, before the testing. And then after the testing, not only is it like, oh, well, Golden was so impressive. I'm like, I didn't realize exactly his physical makeup. oh, he actually makes more sense for this team than Egbuka does. So it wasn't necessarily like he was a second round pick and now moving him up, but it just, the picture kind of came together where it made more sense.
Yeah. No, look, wherever they end up or whatever kind of capital they have, if they could move up into the late first round, like I'm interested in one of those receivers at the end of the first round, beginning of the second round. And I get it. Like, people are nervous about the Patriots drafting wide receivers. You can't
especially early in the second round.
You can't just stop drafting receivers. Like, you're going to have to, this is why, like, this free agent class and like looking at these guys that you were hoping would come out and become available. This is why you have to keep drafting receivers and hope that you eventually hit on one. Like a T. Higgins, like, they're just not going to hit free agency most of the time. And Chris Godwin is still, I thought, like, was still almost sort of a gamble coming off that injury. And like, even he's might not be available.
It doesn't sound like he might be a little behind schedule on that rehab too, which is not a good sign, because he already was.
Like, yeah, like these high end receivers, like, you pretty much have to get them in the draft or trade a bunch of draft capital to get them. And like, they don't seem like they have much of an appetite for that. They're really not in a position to do that, in my opinion. I feel like I'd rather they just use the picks and like, look, they have a lot to prove in terms of how they've been drafting in recent years, but they just have to start drafting better. And I want them to keep making draft picks, Barth. I don't want them trading away all their draft picks and getting all their players in free agency. They have to get it in the draft.
I will say, when it comes to their issues developing wide receivers, something that impresses me about Golden is how advanced he is for his age. Both, I think, technically and mentally, like at the podium, he's, very professional, oddly enough. So there were two guys from Texas, Isaiah Bond, wide receiver, and Jaden Blue, the running back, who both talked about wanting to break Xavier Worthy's 40 record. They were teammates with Xavier Worthy at Texas, right? And, they talked a big game about how they were going to break it. Bond ran a 4.4. I think Blue ran in a 4.5 or 4.4, something like that. Matthew Golden, who was the one guy that didn't talk about it, ran in the 4.2s. And like, he was just all business up there. I actually got to ask him about meeting with the Patriots, and he said it was good. They coached me hard. I like to be coached hard. Brief interaction, but seemed like he had the mentality that you're looking for. So if we're doing a Patriots wide receiver board, like, this is just for the Patriots. I think it's different for different teams. But if we're just doing a Patriots wide receiver board, Matthew Golden might even be my number 2 after Travis Hunter. For the Patriots. That doesn't mean I think they should take him at 4, right? Because you can get him later.
Right.
But between his maturity, how advanced he is technically, I think he's the reason I put him so high. I don't love the guys that play like on paper. If I'm starting a team, I have to pick a receiver. I'm taking Ted McMillan, right? But guys like that generally don't translate as well into Josh McDaniels' offense. The things that Matthew Golden does, like, boom, you put him in at that Z role, he's such a fit. He's such a textbook piece for what they want to do. Not in the slot. You still need your slot guy, but like, I'm trying to think of who the equivalent player would be. Honestly, he's kind of like a more explosive Malcolm Mitchell, kind of in that role. Sure. They're stylistically different players. It's not a player comp. Who's my player comp for Golden? I can't remember. It wouldn't be Mitchell. They play the game differently, but they get to the results differently, but I think they can get to the same results, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
So like, putting him in that sort of role, it's going to look a little different, but you're going to have this hopefully a similar outcome. So I really like Matthew Golden for the Patriots.
Okay. But so you get to the end of the first round, early second, and like, those guys are available. The guys you mentioned, Ibuka, Luther Burden, Matthew Golden. Like, if the Patriots take one of those guys, that's going to be considered like an appropriate pick. Like, okay, this is where I expected him to go.
At the end of the first, top of the second?
Yes, because like Jalen Polk at 34 or 37, wherever he was picked, that was considered a bit high, a bit overdrafted, right? And like people thought like he'd maybe be late second, early third round type of pick.
That
and so
pick
like
should have been A.D. Mitchell.
Exactly. Like that's sort of my point. If they take Matthew Golden somewhere in the 25 to 35 range, like, that's not going to be considered like a reach of any kind. Like, they'll say, okay, maybe they actually made a correct pick.
So the only thing with Burden, if they were to pass on him, let's say Golden and Boo could go, there are some questions about his buy-in, about his focus from his time at Missouri. You saw his report from Lance Zierlein on NFL.com, right? What was the I forget what the exact phrasing was. Like, he got bored with the offense when he wasn't getting his targets. I think he'd be a high target player in the Patriots offense. So this is another one where if we're doing a general big board, I have him above Golden, but I worry about them with that kind of receiver.
Yeah.
Right. If you look at where I had him going in my mock draft, it makes all the sense in the world. But if they passed on him, it would be, sometimes there's guys that fall further than we think. I go back to DeJuan Jones a couple years ago, the tackle from Ohio State, who eventually went to the Browns in the 4th round, but I thought he was going to be like a high 2nd round pick. And it just, the one variable we don't have is the meetings and the personality and, some of that behind the scenes stuff. So when guys start falling at a certain point, I'll almost be like, well, I thought he'd go higher than this, but somebody knows something I don't know. And I'm just going to chalk this up to that. Right.
Yeah, I think receivers are pains in the ass. It's like I don't want to I want my receivers to all be professional, perfect, like that.
No, you have to have
happen.
And look, Golden definitely has some of that edge to him. But with Burden, just people who watched the BC game last year know what I'm talking about. It's
like you got to be a special level of a-hole.
And I don't
to not be an asset to your team, even if you are a bit of an a-hole.
I don't think he's that level. But I think if you're the Patriots might be, after the way last year went, they might say rather safe than sorry at that position this year, given it the way everything went. If that makes sense.
Yeah. Well, then in that case, maybe they will sign someone, one of the mid-tier receivers in free agency, a guy that'll be grateful for the deal, maybe getting a little overpaid. And like, he just wants to, do what's best for the team and all that. Like they're not going to go all out for a Devontae Adams, so to speak, if he becomes a free agent, like someone in that tier, Stephon Diggs, like I don't think they're going to go in that direction. Even though Stephon Diggs actually came up in one of the stories, was it the Herald?
I think so. I'm just, people who've watched my stuff know I'm a massive fan of Stephon Diggs. I think he's been one of the most underrated players in the NFL for a while now. I think he can make plays at multiple levels. I think he changes in offense. But he's 31 years old. He's coming off a torn ACL. Like there's just a few too many red flags there for me. If they added him on top of somebody else, if they were to get, if they were to trade for veteran receiver, draft a receiver high, and then you add Diggs, like people think of Diggs as being one of these like nutcase receivers. Let's not forget, he gets traded to Houston last year and is named a captain year 1. That's a guy that when he buys in, helps the team. And I know he had an iffy ending in Buffalo. How much of that was his fault? How much of it was the team's fault? We'll never know.
I think he's just a bit of a handful. Little high maintenance, I would say.
Diggs is a second guy, second edition, kind of like I said, Patrick McCarry. Diggs is a second edition wide receiver. I'm not sure I could love that more. That would be awesome if he's the second best receiver they add.
Yeah.
If he's the best receiver they add, again, coming off that torn ACL, the upside's there. I'm not saying it would be the worst move in the world, but I would be very.
That's a fair point.
I'm not betting any overs or anything.
It's a fair point. He's not good enough at this point to be your number 1 receiver addition.
We don't know that he's good enough. He can be, but we don't know.
Yeah, but it's probably asking too much for him to be your second receiver addition. It's probably probably a fair.
It would be a fantastic haul. I mean, they could do it. They have all this money. Like I think they could do it. I don't know who's better than him that you're getting, but like in theory, let's say I guess he's also coming off a torn ACL. I was going to say if they had Ayuk and Diggs, then all ACL wide receiver room, that's probably not great. But
throw Bourne in there,
right? Yeah, 2 years removed. There you go. Any other thoughts on free? Because we've kind of hammered the big positions, right? Tackle, receiver. Any other thoughts on free agent rumors, rumblings, guys you're more into now? We can get into the Josh Sweat thing. Them maybe not looking at him. That tells me they maybe want more defensive end pass rushers than linebackers so that they're not committed to the blitz. Any other thoughts on other positions in free agency?
Yeah, I mean, Josh Sweat and Khalil Mack were mentioned as like the edge rushers that they're not interested in.
I'm fine with them being out on Khalil Mack.
I'm fine with that. I'm just saying it's interesting to know that like we're not looking at this type of player. Yeah. We need a different type of player in the front seven. And apparently they're interested in Jamian Sherwood at linebacker like that. He's sort of going to be the symbol of what they're looking for at linebacker. To me, it's more so not so much like who they're going to sign, especially at that position in the front seven, but like, what does it mean for a guy like Jawan Bentley, who's become a team captain? And like, you saw what the defense looked all out of sorts without him last year. Like, how does he fit in going forward if they start to remake their linebacker room?
I think you can play Sherwood next to Bentley. right? I think maybe that's getting the smaller, quicker guy to play next to the downhill guy.
Complement each other.
Right.
Okay.
The thing about Sherwood that's really interesting to me, and I think he's a good player in his own right, but something I'd kind of tinkered with, I don't know that I've actually given this take on the air, it was something I was texting people about, right? If they are going to go to this smaller, so here we go, buckle up. If they are going to go to this smaller, quicker defense, and something I've been high on is getting that true free safety, and people say, well, are you going to lock yourself into being a 3 safety team, right? If they signed a guy like Javon Holland, are you going to lock yourself into being a 3 safety team? Because you got to have that guy out there, and Duggar and Peppers are both going to play a ton, right? Well, okay. Because I want to get both those guys back in the box, Duggar and Peppers, to see if I can get them going again. I had kind of toyed with the idea of, what if you essentially just convert one of them to a linebacker? And what I'd kind of heard was, even for one of these quicker defenses, they're still a little small, right? I think they're both like 315, somewhere in that range.
Yeah, but Jabril Peppers especially plays the V word, violent.
Right.
Like, they've been looking for violent players. So I feel like Jabril Peppers will fit in, even if it's like sort of like a linebacker hybrid.
Well, so the pushback I'd gotten was that even though they kind of play that style, they're still a little small for the position. Jamie and Sherwood, 6'2", 216. That's the same size.
Yeah, Duggar's bigger than that, isn't
so he? If that's the prototype they want, and I'm not, running downs, second and short, yeah, you're taking one of them off the field and you're putting a real linebacker in there. But if that's the profile they want, and maybe they just want to add more talent elsewhere, I'm not saying that they don't have to sign this guy, but I would absolutely consider something where those two guys are going to kind of split, playing strong safety and that second small linebacker next to Bentley with a new free safety up top, whoever it is, whether it's Javon Holland in free agency, Andrew Makuba in the draft, Billy Bowman in the draft. Like, we can talk about those guys, but that's definitely something I would kind of toy with if they're okay having a linebacker playing under 220.
I didn't mean to get into the X and O's too much, but I apologize.
No, I wanted to give that take. I like that take.
But it's another question is, like, are they going to play nickel? Like, are they going to keep doing that, or is that going to be another evolution of the defense where they're moving away from the nickel, especially the big nickel with the 3 safeties? Like, I wonder if we're going to see less of that.
Well, the fact they want to bring Jonathan Jones back, which the Herald reported, kind of tells me that at least to some extent they're going to keep that slot corner role involved. Do they maybe want to try to go bigger there? Mike Vrabel generally had bigger corners in Tennessee. They definitely need a bigger corner on the outside. I was happy to hear they're looking at some of those guys both in free agency, and I think the big corners on day 2 of the draft, Maxwell Hairston, Damian Porter, like, sign me up for those guys.
Hairston with the fastest 40 time.
Hairston, and Porter is the guy who's 6'3", ran a 4.3 with, like, I think he had the longest arms of any corner. So this is a guy, I don't know if you remember how into Tariq Woolen I was in the draft that year, the kid from UTSA.
Can't say I remember that one, Barth.
He's one of my favorite prospects I've ever watched, like, pound for pound, and Porter profiles similarly to him. So it was interesting to kind of get some of that intel in terms of the kind of players they want and maybe who could be on the way out. To me, if they can flip Devon Godshaw, great. It's becoming very clear he's not going to be a fit here.
No.
If you get a 6th, I might try a pick swap, but if you can get a 6th or 7th round pick for him, great. The Bengals, to me, are a team that would make some sense being in that market. They really need to improve their defensive front. The 49ers would be a team that might make some sense. I don't know if you're going to trade him in the division. If you are, maybe the Bills. I think they need to be a little more stout up front.
I don't think they're going to trade him, honestly. I think they're going to have to cut him. I don't think anyone's going to take him on.
I think they'll get something for him just because there's not, and it's a good draft for defensive tackles, but like the old school run stopping nose tackle, there aren't a ton of those guys around because there aren't a ton of teams that play that way anymore.
Right.
So on rarity, I think you might be able to get something for him. It might be a 7th round pick, but at this point, I'll take a 7th round pick, right? They'd have 4 7s. Let's say they trade him. You have 4 7s. You have 69, 77 in the 3rd round. Let's say you package one of those with 2 of those 7s. From 69, move up 4 or 5 spots, get in the back end of the 2nd round. Like, that might make a difference in this draft. So I'll take all the draft capital I can get at this point. If somebody will give me something, they don't need to win the trade for Devon Godchaux. Just get something.
Look, I'll take the draft pick. I'm just saying I feel like it's a no-brainer situation where the other team's gonna say, we're not trading for the nose tackle. Like, we're not gonna trade for that guy. We'll just take him. We'll take him after you release him. Then we'll bring him in and talk to him. Like, I feel like it's gonna be one of those situations.
Any other free agency thoughts?
I think we've covered it.
All right. Combine. So big picture. The running back class rules. I mean, rules. The awesome group. So much talent. One guy didn't test well, and it was my guy, Ollie Gordon, which I'm bummed about. But besides him, they're great. I thought the wide receiver class exceeded expectations. There's definitely some letdowns, but I was impressed with that group. And I was impressed with the corners. I thought the corners had a really good workout. I thought the tight ends weren't collectively as impressive as I was maybe hoping. And same for the edge rushers. Maybe I got my hopes too high with that group because of how they've been talked about, but I would say big picture, that's how I felt. Everything else, more or less what I expected. I guess the quarterbacks were a letdown. I wasn't planning on focusing a ton on the quarterbacks coming in.
No, of course not.
All right. Apparently we're doing the whole random first round thing again with Jackson Dart for whatever reason. But any players in specific that stood out to you or positions that stood out to you?
No one specific, but like my question for you, Barth, was along the lines of what we were talking about earlier with the receivers. Like, did any trench players sort of raise their stock in terms of becoming like a high day 2 pick where maybe the Patriots could target a tackle or an edge rusher with their second round pick, or maybe move up into the late first? Like, any guys that you think they could maybe target that sort of improve themselves at the combine?
If anything, I think the theme was guys from that fringe first round group improving out of that into the top 20, like Shamar Stewart, one of the big winners of the week. I think he worked his way. He's a first round lock to me at this point, and maybe into the top half of that first round. I thought he was really impressive. I thought a lot of the nose tackles were good. Harmon, Derek Harmon from Oregon, Jamari Caldwell, also from Oregon, was really good. And look, eventually some of these guys are going to fall back down, but I think you saw, I know I just said the group as a whole was disappointing, but I think you saw a couple guys really bump their stock up. The one guy who I'm not sure how he's going to be viewed, because he had an up and down combine, was James Pierce from Tennessee. So he ran a 4.4740 at, I think, 6'4", 245, which is great. He also had one of the worst verticals. Like, he didn't do well in the jumping drills, which translates to lower body power, right? How explosive are you? So you knew coming in, James Pierce was primarily a speed rusher. I think that was reinforced. There are going to be some teams, if you're picking in the first round, especially high enough in the first round, where you want a guy that is going to be able to play on all three downs. I don't know, at least right away, that James Pierce is that kind of guy where he's going to play regularly against the run.
Feels like a pure third down guy
initially. And he has room to grow into being a 3-down player, but Shamar Stewart looks like a 3-down player. There's other, his name's just top of my head, but like some of these edge guys, that Landon Jackson looks more like a 3-down player. Well, I don't know if he'll go above Pierce, but he's a guy that I think cemented himself in that regard. Some of these other guys look like pure 3-down guys. Pierce more of a speed guy. Now, in Tennessee, the Titans made it work with those players. So I wonder if James Pierce, now the report was they're out on Josh Sweat, who's another similar kind of player. So there's both sides of the coin here.
Yeah, that's another thing where like they're pretty much not going to get any of those guys. Like James Pierce, probably not a fit for the Patriots. Are they guy like that?
Are they out on Josh Sweat because of system fit, or are they out on him for another reason? Because maybe they want that kind of player, but they don't think he's as good as maybe what he's going to command on this market for that in that sense. So like Pierce to me is a guy that maybe falls. He's not a fall of 38. Does he fall into their trade up range? And is he a guy that they look at and say, you know what? We need to be able to get after the quarterback first and foremost, and we'll fill in the run defense later. It's a really good defensive tackle class. Maybe that's like a next year move. They do still have Anthony Jennings who can play on the other side, who's a good run defender. So you do have somebody who can complement him, but I do wonder if James Pierce fell into their range where, he's not a great run player, but he's so good at getting the quarterback. They just look at it and say, this guy's supposed to be a top 10 pick. He fell. He fits a need we have. Best player available kind of thing. Right.
Yeah. I mean, it should be mostly best player available. But there's so I actually do have a specific name, Barth. I'm surprised we haven't even mentioned this guy once in the podcast, and that's Mason Graham.
Yes,
who has long been rumored to be a guy for the Patriots at 4, and like some of the reports out there suggest that like it's between him and Will Campbell at 4.
Well, neither of
that
them
was
a great
I was gonna say,
week.
like, this is during the combine when they're like even before the combine when these reports came out, and then you got the report that from Mass Live that they view Will Campbell as a tackle either way.
Yeah.
Like, do they feel similarly about Mason Graham now that he came in? Like, I'm confused about this because you said he measured 320 at Michigan, and now
he was listed. It's different,
right? So is Michigan just lying to us on that one?
Well,
like
all these schools and the professional teams too. Like they'll, you know, a guy's 6'11", and I'll call him a 7-footer, right? A guy's 295, call him 302.
I thought they were all honest, Bart. That this was on the level.
Do you remember a couple of years ago when the NBA announced that they were going to stop measuring guys in sneakers, and then everybody in the NBA like shrunk 3 inches, like over one off season, all the measurements came in the next year. You know, things
heights
like
and
that.
weights are generally generous.
What was Zdeno Chara listed at?
Oh, he was usually 6'9".
Do you think he was actually 6'9"?
He was 7 feet on skates.
Right, exactly, right. So
he was pretty tall.
He was pretty tall. But like there's always and I'm saying this a little bit. 25 pounds is more than a little bit. When we talk about Mason Graham. So
especially coming in under 300. Like I thought he was penciled in like at least like a 305, 310 type of guy.
So I honestly feel similarly now about Graham as I do about Campbell. The reason Graham was supposed to go so high, was projected so high, was, wow, this guy moves like a 290-pound attacking defensive tackle, but he weighs 320.
Yeah.
That's rare. Well, turns out he was moving like a 290-pound defensive tackle because he was one.
Yeah.
That doesn't mean he's bad. Like, he's still good for what he is.
But you had him drop to 9 in your mock draft.
Yeah, that might have been a little harsh. Some of that was I wanted some other players to go above. I almost took him at 7 with the Jets. I was really close doing that. But it's like Braden Fiske last year, Florida State, good player, but he's one of these undersized attacking defensive tackles. He went in the 2nd round. If you redrafted it, he'd probably be a 1st-round pick, but he's not going top 5 because he's not that special makeup. Same thing with Will Campbell. It's like he has some really special traits, and if he's a little bit under on the arms, like the traits make up for it. Well, it turns out he's more than a little under, where now you're in massive outlier territory. And people will point to the occasional tackle that has been way under with the arms that has succeeded. You know, every time I tweet about Mason Graham being under with the weight we thought, Aaron Donald was 285. Do you believe he's Aaron Donald? He's Aaron Donald. Obviously, you take him at 4.
Yeah.
Obviously. You can't, if every player was Aaron Donald wouldn't be special, right? So,
and you can't bank on Will Campbell being an outlier either.
Right.
Like that's
exactly
that's
so
tough.
Like, look, if you truly believed in Will Campbell before the measurement, and you just saw on tape, arms be damned, he's a tackle, you can still have that same conviction. Same with Mason Graham. I don't care if he's playing at 320 or 290. I saw what I saw on tape. Yes, he's a different kind of player, but he still makes an impact. If you want to believe that, that's fine. But you have to go in knowing you truly have to believe the talent, the skill set is rare.
Undeniable.
Because that is going to, not just undeniable, but rare, right? It can't just be, I think he's a really good player. Those guys have to be better than really good because they have to overcompensate, right? And if you believe that, then fine. But you have to have so much conviction and belief in those guys because they are trying to do something that historically is not done. And maybe you believe that much in either one of them. Maybe you believe that much in both of them. I'm not going to fault you for doing that. But just understand this isn't as simple as, it's a little under. No, these are guys that would be significant outliers to have that. And I think they'll both be good players. But to have that kind of success at those positions, I think they'd be significant outliers. Yes, Aaron Donald was 285 and dominated. Is Mason? You want to bet on Mason Graham having the same level of talent? You're basically telling me you believe Mason Graham is going to be greatest defensive tackle of all time, or has that level of talent.
And again, like Aaron Donald was like the 11th overall pick or something like that. It's not like he was a surefire. Like
hindsight's 2020.
Yeah,
because teams were, this guy's a little undersized.
Yeah,
how much do you truly believe in the talent? So, I think that's just something you need to keep in mind when you talk about those guys. I think they're both still top 10 picks.
I think I just want Will Johnson at this point. Screw all these other guys.
Yeah,
I'm kidding, Barth, but you know what I mean.
Well, no, I think I'm lower on Will Johnson than most people.
Yeah.
So I don't. Yeah, I'm not a big Will Johnson guy. So this is where it gets tough, right? And this is kind of how I wanted to wrap the podcast up. And this is why Ronnie Stanley landing would be so helpful for the Patriots. We'll do Travis Hunter in a second because I do want to talk about the Travis Hunter of it all. He's not there. Who's your guy you're going to the table for right now? I don't know that I have a guy that I'm putting my fist down saying he's a Patriot. Like, who's the most well-rounded prospect on the board? It's probably Ashton Genty. You know, I don't know if you're taking a running back. I'm probably not.
Please don't.
So now you have a slower receiver, a short arm tackle, offensive tackle, undersized defensive tackle, cornerback who didn't play last year, essentially, and Will Johnson. I think Tyler Warren, we should probably be talking more about Tyler Warren than we are.
Yeah.
He might be second after Genty in terms of just best well-rounded prospect.
Mm-hmm. I think he was reported as a name to watch if they trade down.
If they trade down, well, so trading down is ideal if Hunter's not there. I don't know that you're going to get the offer, although at that point I might take not a lot, even if you get an extra top 100 pick. But let me ask you, like, you have to snap decision. Hunter's gone. Who are you taking?
Just at 4?
Yeah.
Man, I think I'd still go with Mason Graham. I think he can get him over 300 and then, see how he does with that.
Well, you put weight on, you lose quickness. You got to remember that.
You said this, I think it was on Felger and Maz or one of the shows, like, you can add weight. You can't make your arms longer.
You can add
comparing
weight,
Graham and Campbell.
There are consequences that come with adding weight.
Okay.
Like, you change your body type that much, you're going to lose some explosiveness.
Is he though, or did you think he might have cut some weight for the combine? He might have put some back on.
I don't understand why he would have done that because he didn't work out. I don't think he played at 296. I don't think he played at 320 either. I think he's probably 300, 305. I think that's probably where he's playing. Now that's a fit in this defense, but he's not that unicorn kind of player that I think some people thought he was.
I'm done with the unicorn talk. I think this draft stinks, and there's no unicorns in this draft. Even Abdul Carter, who's probably going to be a really good player, I don't consider him a unicorn. I think I'm out on that.
So at this point, I think it's clear the best case scenario for the Patriots is Travis Hunter falls to 4. We'll have to see how that happens. I think the Browns and Giants are adding quarterbacks. I think that's happening. I don't think that's a debate. And when I say that, I mean adding quarterbacks this offseason.
Right, not necessarily
in the draft. Giants striking out on Matthew Stafford, very good news for the Patriots. Now we need Tom Brady to get his recruiting hat on and get going and get the next quarterback to the Raiders. Then we need to hope somebody wants to really work with the new Saints head coaches with the Eagles. It's their offensive coordinator. Come on. Lefty quarterback for Boise State.
Sorry.
Wow. All I can think of is Chip Kelly, and it's most certainly not Chip Kelly.
Eagles offensive coordinator. Saints head coach.
Yes.
Kellen Moore.
Thank you. I don't know why I had Chip Kelly in my head. Kellen Moore, offensive ingenuity, all of that. Okay, does he become a landing spot? Like, we need the Browns and Giants to strike out. I will say, or, somebody else, maybe it's the Jets or the Saints or the Raiders moving up and taking a quarterback up there. Like, you need the quarterbacks to go up there. If I had to bet on it today, I would still say I don't think Hunter makes it to 4. I don't think we get 2 quarterbacks in the top 3. But just after being down there all week, right, and just being immersed in it and hearing what I heard, I feel, and you check out my mock draft this morning, I talked about this. If I had to guess, I'm leaning no. But I do think it feels more possible now than it did prior to the combine.
Sure. Yeah, no, and we talked about it on, our podcast last week. I know I told you that I think Travis Hunter's a little overrated as a prospect. And by overrated, I mean, I just don't think he's going to be the Shohei Ohtani of football. And when I say Ohtani is special because he's elite at hitting and pitching. He's an excellent player in both areas of baseball. I don't think Travis Hunter is going to be that. I don't think he's necessarily elite on either side of the ball. Even if he plays both sides of the ball, I think he could be good at both. And there's value there, and it would be fun. It'd be fun to see him make an interception and then catch a touchdown right after, that sort of thing. I just don't. I think you got to stop short of saying if you think he's going to be this unicorn greatest player of all time because he plays both sides at a high level type of player. Not saying I would necessarily pass on him. Maybe I said that last week. Maybe I'm going back on my word now. But if he falls to 4, yes, I'll take him. And you compared him to, I think, Devontae Smith.
Yeah.
Was your comp. Look, If Devontae Smith is in this draft, he's
Wide
a top
receiver
3.
one.
He's
Right.
a top 4 pick.
Yep.
I'd take Devontae Smith with the 4th pick in this draft. And so, like, if that's what he is, then yes, I'll take Travis Hunter. I just want to temper expectations of what I think
That's
he's
fair.
really going to be at this level.
Well, I've said this. I'm comfortable taking him there as a receiver. Maybe he plays a little corner here or there. I think it was Phil Perry I was talking to, where it's like, even maybe just play him at free safety and let the instincts kick in, where, it's a role where he can be more focused on offense during the week. He has a lot more room to grow on offense than defense.
Yeah, for sure.
Because he just hasn't focused on offense as much in his career. I think if you let him fully focus on offense, he, not necessarily day one, but he has the potential to be a guy that can dictate coverage and you can build a passing game around. So
now, is Todd Downing the guy that can refine his route running?
That is a good question. That is a fair question.
Maybe McDaniels could.
I think McDaniels could help. I would take him up there, and then and you develop him there. You develop him as a wide receiver. Mike Vrabel said this week, it's really hard to get those receivers, especially if you don't draft them. Travis Hunter is the guy I think that has that upside. I would take Travis Hunter as a receiver at 4, but I would take calls on the pick. I'm not moving out for nothing, but if somebody's going to give me a future first, I would seriously consider that. I'm not like that high. I'm high on Travis Hunter, but if I can get a future first, I'd rather have, 2 first-round picks than just Travis Hunter, whoever those picks end up.
I think my early conclusion is that, like, I'm not dead set on anybody. I don't look at any of these players like they absolutely have to take this guy in this draft. So, like, maybe I should just be team trade down at this point. Like, trade down, get more picks, accumulate more players. If it's all just like a bunch of, solid players or flawed players that you need to work with, like, just trade down and see if someone wants to move up for Travis Hunter, like you said, or if one of those quarterbacks is there for, like, see if you can do that.
It's super easy to be team trade down in this draft. It's just a matter of the trade being there, because who are teams trading up for, right? You know me, I'm usually pretty trade happy in the mock drafts. I only had 3 in the one I put up today, which you can check out on 985thesportshub.com, where we will have coverage throughout the week leading up to free agency. We will not do this sort of show on Monday because free agency starts at noon. So by the time we get it done, it will be useless. So we will do, like, I think the plan is, and it's subject to change, but like we did last year, every time they sign a player, we'll kind of have a quick little 5-10 minute reaction.
Sure.
We'll do player to player.
And hopefully they'll be hearing from us on Monday afternoon in light of that.
Hopefully we'll be doing this on Monday.
Yeah.
And then we'll
if you see us on Twitter live at Monday at noon, that's a good sign.
Right. And then we'll do either at the end of the week or beginning of next week, kind of big picture, how it all fits together. So make sure you subscribe to the Patriots audio feed, and the Sports Hub YouTube channel, Sports Hub Patriots audio feed, Sports Hub YouTube channel to get those, to be updated when those come up. 985thesportshub.com too for more off-season news. Until the next one, for Matt Dolloff, I'm Alex Barth. Thanks for tuning in. We'll talk to you next time.